Good afternoon and good evening, and welcome to the NRIC Tech Talk Environmental Reviews with the NRC. Before we get started, I'd like to go over just a few items that will help you participate in today's event most effectively. For the best experience, please turn off any VPN or similar connections. And as we go through the presentation, please submit any questions you might have by typing your question into the question section of the control panel. You can send those questions at any time during the presentation and we'll address those during the Q&A. If you have any technical issues, please email Cheyenne Odenthal. Her email address is in the chat section of the control panel. And for any follow-up programmatic questions, please send an email to enric@inl.gov. This event will be recorded and we'll provide it on the NRIC website afterwards. So I'm just going to take a couple of minutes here to set the context and for today's event and explain the purpose of it before we get into the great content that we have planned today. A significant piece of NRIC's strategy is to try to anticipate and address common regulatory challenges for innovators pursuing demonstration projects, including challenges related to Nuclear Regulatory Commission licensing, to Department of Energy authorization, and then generically in both areas to NEPA, the National Environmental Policy Act. In February of this year, an addendum to the 2019 MOU between the Department of Energy and the NRC formalized the coordination between DOE and NRC with regard to NRIC projects. And that addendum specifically focuses on research, development, and demonstration projects. And it really solidifies our partnership in order to deliver successful nuclear reactor demonstrations. Under the addendum, we have a coordination group among DOE, NRC, and NRIC. And that group identified that innovators were asking some similar questions of the NRC on a few different topics. So the next few seminars in our Tech Talk series address several of those key topics that innovators have been asking about somewhat repeatedly. And the idea here is to reach more people than the NRC is able to reach in one-on-one meetings, and ensure that more of the community is getting access to the information, and also to be more efficient with the NRC staff's time, since they can take questions and answers, and additionally the community can benefit from the questions of others. So this is that opportunity with respect to environmental reviews. Today's presenter is Mallecia Sutton, and I'll introduce her in just a couple minutes here. She's going to provide an overview on the environmental review process. NRIC has done a significant amount of work in the NEPA space with collaborators, and we see it as a key element of a successful demonstration project. It can really be the long pole in the tent. So we want to get ahead of it and be thinking about it early and make sure that we're pursuing projects with proper consideration of environmental impacts. So NRIC has had a collaboration with Pacific Northwest National Lab to develop an approach that can characterize the environmental impacts of potential advanced reactors using an enveloping approach with a plant parameter envelope. So I wanted to just mention that it has some guidance for microreactors, 60 megawatt thermal or less, and small to medium reactors up to 1,000 megawatt thermal. And there's a guidance report on that on the NRIC website in the resources section. So I wanted to just point folks toward it in case that might be useful to you. We're also developing with PNNL a roadmap to help innovators navigate the potential environmental review alternatives and take advantage of some of the information that we've developed as well as information that others have developed. So with that as background, I want to go ahead and introduce Mallecia, and also let you know that Stephen Grabinski, who's a program manager with NRIC, will be helping to moderate the question and answer session today. And then Jason Andrus from Idaho National Laboratory will be concluding the session today. So I'm going to just briefly mention them. As I said, Steve is on our NRIC team. Jason Andrus is in the Nuclear Safety Division at INL, and he is a critical member of our broader team to help make demonstration reactors at Idaho National Laboratory successful. And he has experience in a lot of different areas of DOE authorization as well as NRC licensing and NEPA. So I'm really happy to have them here today with us as well, supporting the discussion. And now I want to introduce Mallecia Sutton, who works for the Nuclear Regulatory Commission as a Senior Licensing Project Manager in the Advanced Reactor Licensing Branch in the Division of Advanced Reactors and Non-Power Production and Utilization Facilities in the Office of Nuclear Reactor Regulation. Currently, she's working on several policy and procedural efforts and is the lead licensing project manager for pre-application activities regarding the TerraPower Natrium and molten chloride fast reactor technologies. Before becoming a licensing project manager, Ms. Sutton served as an environmental project manager at the NRC for 13 years. Ms. Sutton has led several of the environmental reviews for applications for new reactor combined licenses, design certifications, early site permits, and amendments. Prior to joining the NRC, Ms. Sutton worked for the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers for over 7 years as a biologist and environmental project manager. While at the Army Corps of Engineers, she worked on water resource projects, including ecosystem restoration, watershed management, flood control, and navigation. Ms. Sutton brings extensive experience in the research and dissemination of environmental regulations for the purpose of documenting regulatory compliance. And now I really look forward to hearing from Mallecia on the environmental reviews with the NRC. And Mallecia, I want to really thank you very much for taking the time to prepare this presentation and to join us today. We look forward to hearing your presentation and having some question and answer time at the end.
Thank you, Ashley. Hi, everyone. Like Ashley said, my name is Mallecia Sutton. I would like to welcome everyone to today's presentation. As she stated, I'm a senior project manager in the Office of Advanced Reactors and Non-Power Production and Utilization Facilities. I'm here to talk to you today on NRC's environmental review process pertaining to advanced reactors. And after my presentation, I'll be happy to answer any questions. And due to the bandwidth issues, I will turn off my camera and then start my presentation. Today's presentation will cover NRC's mission, acts and regulations governing environmental reviews, and an overview of the environmental review process. Next slide, please. The NRC is led by 5 presidentially appointed commissioners. The NRC staff consists of technical experts in various fields such as science, engineering, law, and project management, to name a few. Our agency is charged by the federal law to be the nation's only regulatory of commercial nuclear materials, independently ensuring these materials are used, handled, and stored safely and securely. The NRC mission is that the NRC license and regulates the nation's civilian use of radioactive materials to provide reasonable assurance of adequate protection of public health and safety, to promote the common defense and security, and to protect the environment. The NRC's job is to protect the public health and safety and the environment by thoroughly reviewing each license application we receive before deciding whether or not to grant an applicant's request. The NRC does not promote nuclear power. In the role of the regulator, as it pertains to commercial nuclear power, the NRC determines whether it is safe to build and operate a proposed nuclear plant at a site, evaluates the environmental impacts of building and operating a nuclear power plant at the proposed site. We issue permits for construction and license for operation of a nuclear power plants, certifies plant designs, and license individual reactor operators. Slide 4, please. In performing its duties, NRC is subject to the National Environmental Policy Act, or as NEPA. NEPA is a legislation that requires federal agencies to consider environmental consequences of federal actions in order to inform the public about their decision making. NRC NEPA implementation regulations require an environmental impact statement for major federal actions significantly affecting the environment, such as a combined license for power reactor facility or an early site permit which banks the site for approximately 20 years, just to give you a few examples. An EIS is a detailed statement on the environmental impact of the proposed action and alternatives to the proposed action and public disclosure of the environmental impacts of the major federal action significantly affecting the environment. Slide 5, please. There are several acts and regulations, as you can see listed on this slide, that govern the environmental review. Some major ones, as I said, as listed. The NRC staff performs the actions required by these acts and regulations concurrently with our NEPA review process. We already discussed NEPA, so let's go into Endangered Species Act. The Endangered Species Act, which was enacted in 1973, ensures that endangered species are protected. Please note that consultation must be completed before NRC can grant a license. For example, there was a situation during the mandatory hearing where there was a new species that was listed. We had to halt the mandatory hearing, reconsult with Fish and Wildlife to ensure that the proposed action would not cause any undue risk to this new proposed species, and then we engaged with the commission to let them know that we had finished consultation and they proceeded to make their decision. We also talked to the National Historic Preservation and we make sure we consult on any historical or archaeological sites that are close to the project site. We also talked to the SHPO, which is the State Historic Preservation Officers. An example is that during one of the sites, a cemetery was found, and we had to work with the proposed licensee to ensure that they protected the cemetery by providing signs and fencing so there will be no damage to that historical site. So all this to say that NRC staff consult with the state and historic preservation officers in the areas mentioned for facilities to ensure protection of any artifacts. We also, under FAST 41, which is the Title 41 of the FAST Act, the Fixing America's Surface Transportation Act, which was enacted in 2015. We also provide coordination with other federal agencies so we can ensure transparency in the permanent agencies. A few of these projects that we consider under FAST 41 for NRC are the combined license and construction permits. And in addition to the legislation, NRC also has guidance for the travel statement. We also work with the Council of Environmental Quality, performing our NEPA reviews. Going back to the travel statement, this is guidance and principle that the staff follows to promote effective government-to-government interactions with American Indian tribes. Slide 6, please. As stated earlier, our environmental review is based on requirements of the National Environmental Policy Act. NEPA requires federal agencies to apply a systematic approach to evaluate the impacts of its actions. All NRC licensing and regulatory actions subject to Part 51 will require an environmental evaluation. In performing this evaluation, the staff may adopt a previously established category exclusion or prepare an environmental assessment or an environmental impact statement. What is a category exclusion? where category exclusion applies to a class of actions that a federal agency has determined after review by the Council on Environmental Quality do not individually or cumulatively have a significant effect on the human environment, for which, therefore, neither an environmental assessment or environmental impact statement is normally not required. An example of category exclusion related to NRC regulation is an amendments to the regulations that are minor. An environmental assessment is prepared to normally determine whether an action has potentially or can cause significant environmental effects. If not, then a finding of no significant impact is developed. If the proposed federal action is determined to be significantly affect the quality of the human environment, then the federal agency prepares an environmental impact statement. NRC current regulation has determined that a power reactor is a major federal action and requires an environmental impact statement. So, for example, if you were to look at 10 CFR 5120 or 10 CFR 5175, you will see that it requires staff to prepare an environmental impact statement for an application requesting a combined license for construction and operation of a nuclear power plant. In order for staff to develop the environmental impact statement, we follow a structured process outlined in the regulation and guidance, such as Environmental Standard Review Plan, NRIC 1555, and we take a hard look to evaluate the environmental impacts. During slide 7, I will provide the graphical representation of the NRC NEPA process. I will go into more details of the environmental review process. So on this slide, as I stated, it represents the review process. Public participation is an important aspect of a NEPA review process. Environmental review milestones that include public participation are the scoping meeting and the draft environmental impact statement meeting to gather comments on the draft. NRC strives to be open and transparent in its reviews, and as such, stakeholders have many opportunities to participate in the public meetings and environmental and safety reviews. When an application is received, the NRC staff reviews it to ensure that it's complete and technically adequate to accept for review. If acceptable, the application is docketed, and the NRC staff proceed with both the environmental and the safety reviews. The NRC staff starts the environmental review by publishing a notice of intent to inform the public of our plan to prepare environmental impact statement and conduct scoping and conduct the scoping process. The scoping process consists of a 60-day scoping period in which is advertised and facilitated meeting that is normally held in the plant vicinity. Public comments received during the scoping meeting are documented in a transcript. The public can also provide written comments through the end of the scoping period. We include all comments received in our scoping summary report, which is issued. The NRC staff gathers more information to prepare the environmental impact statement during site audit and other data collection activities. The staff uses the audit to visit the project site and the vicinity to meet the applicant's representatives. Please note, this begins the NRC's independent evaluation of the information provided in the applicant's environmental report. The staff analyzes all information gathered, develops a draft EIS, and issues it for public comment, as I said, and at that time, the staff issues a notice of availability that starts the 75-day comment period to gather information on the draft from other agencies and the public. The results of our review is then we looked at into the draft, and based on the comments received, staff will adjust our analysis as needed and finalize the environmental impact statement. Finally, the NRC staff publishes a Federal Register notice of availability of the final EIS. The environmental impact statement requires a record of decision. The record of decision explains our agency decision, describes alternatives and our agency, what the agency considered, and discusses plans for mitigation and monitoring. When the NRC staff publishes a final EIS, we also give it to EPA, and they post it on their website. NRC is required to wait 30 days before making a final decision on the proposed action. Documents associated with the application can be reviewed on a project-specific site on our public website. So just to note, when we dock an application, we provide a special docketed number that is unique to that particular project that you can use to find documents related to the applications on the NRC site. We also put the environmental report, the draft, as well as the final EIS in local libraries to make it easy for anyone in the community to review the information, Next slide, please. NRC coordinate and consult with federal, state, and local tribal government agencies through our NEPA process. We inform the Advisory Council on Historic Preservation when we perform historic property review. We also reach out to National Marine Fisheries. As stated, we also provide our draft document to EPA for them to publish on their website. We have a memorandum of understanding with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. The U.S. Army Corps of Engineers has served as a corporate agency on several of our EIS. You may ask, what is a corporate agency? Is any federal, state, local agency, or tribal government other than the lead agency which has jurisdiction by law or special expertise with respect to any environmental impact involved in the proposal. And we have an MOU with the Corps because the Corps has the lead for the Clean Water Act and Section 404 program. So it's one EIS, one document, which streamline the review process for the prospective licensing. Slide 9, please. To prepare the environmental impact statement, the NRC assembles a team with backgrounds in the necessary scientific and technical disciplines. The NRC's team of experts gather information on a wide range of topics related to environmental issues. This slide shows most of the resource areas and assessed during the environmental review. When we talked about the impact of human environment, we discussed the impact of construction and operation of the nuclear power plant on physical resource areas such as animals, plants, natural resources, looking at land, air, water, etc. In addition to these areas, we also look at the impact of other areas that affect the human environment in such areas as socioeconomics, look at historical and cultural resources, environmental justice, impacts to the health of the surrounding population, both from a radiological and a non-radiological sources, and consideration of the impact of potential accidents. Environmental impacts from non-radiological wastes and fuel cycle, including transportation of the radioactive material, also look at decommissioning of the facility. An additional consideration for power reactors is cost-benefit assessment of potential severe accident mitigation design alternatives. And with that, we go to the question and answers portion, and that concludes my presentation. I'll be happy to answer any questions at this time, and I'm turning on my camera.
Mallecia, thank you so much for your presentation. We got a couple of questions lined up for you. So first, if you could provide the current status of the Advanced Reactor Generic Environmental Impact Statement, and some of the dates that innovators kind of need to be aware of, and also what changes should they expect when the ANR GEIS is published?
So the staff is currently drafting the Advanced Reactor GEIS and the rulemaking. The date for public comment on the draft is May 2022, and the final issuance of the environmental impact statement and rulemaking would be January 2024. So basically, as staff is looking at this advanced reactor, we're looking to reduce individual licensing review time associated with the costs and increase regulatory stability. We're also looking to streamline the environmental review by reducing the number of issues that must be considered in any individual environmental review as well. And so currently the Advanced Reactor GEIS is structured in a plant parameter envelope. And also we have a site parameter envelope that is have assumptions and values associated with the GEIS. And I just wanted to note that a GEIS is also a technology neutral. So so the assumption is it doesn't matter where you put in the advanced nuclear reactor, as long as it fits within the PPE and the site parameter envelope. So hopefully that answered your question.
Perfect, thank you. And we have some more rolling in. So one from Jason Red regarding Endangered Species Act and the National Historic Preservation Act. How far off-site does the NRC consider in their evaluation? Is it a set distance in meters, miles, et cetera, site specific? Thank you.
So we have a 50-mile radius that that we go out and assess our analysis for endangered species, and as we look at other regulations like the historical preservation. So we do have that 50-mile radius that we do go out and then we reach out to the endangered species, Fish and Wildlife, as well as the Historic Preservation Officer within the plant vicinity to ensure that we are gathering the necessary information to protect the endangered species, as well as any and don't damage any artifacts in the area.
Perfect, thank you. We have one from Robert Hayes, and to what extent is the NRC concerned with the psychosomatic effects to the public from low doses? Is there any intent to address this?
So I'm not the dose expert, and I know that we are doing rulemaking and looking at the Part 53 rulemaking. We have the proposal for Part 51. So I know we are definitely looking at those. Like I said, I'm not the expert and don't know exactly where we are, but I could tell you that we are working on regulations and guidance, looking at how the dose will affect the public with these new advanced reactors.
All right, there's several coming in. So is there an opportunity for microreactors under certain capacity to fall under categorical exclusions?
So there is a category exclusion rulemaking that's ongoing right now. And I'm not quite sure, to be honest with you, if they're looking at that, but I do know that there's a category rulemaking that's ongoing. So I can provide that information to the lead entity who's in charge of that rule, and see if that's something that they are considering under that rulemaking.
Perfect. Right now, the PPE approach is utilized in the early site permit process. Can a licensee pursue that approach in the construction permit process in order to minimize new and significant information in an operating license application review?
So when you use the word new and significant, that means you have a application that you're referencing. So let's say they have an early site permit application that has been already approved by the commission, and you're coming in and you're referencing that ESP, then we will look on the 5192 for new and significant information that's different from what was done at that early site permit application. So for example, we're proposing an advanced reactor guise. So if you're coming in and you're doing something new and different from what's in the guise, then we look at the new and significant information under that regulation. So it's not just saying you have a PPE and we're looking at new and significant. When you come in and your application is a CP and you're now referencing an ESP that's been approved already, we're looking at the current construct of doing a brand new review on that application. It's not new and significant, if that makes sense. Okay.
I'm going to keep firing away at you because they're really coming in. Are there indifferences in the EA process for power versus non-power reactors? Are vendors considering demonstrating their technologies via the latter route, i.e. non-power reactors?
So there's a proposal to look at Part 51 to consider the EA route. Right now, for any power reactor, as the current NRC regulatory construct, we have to do an environmental impact statement. So if there's any input, suggestion on the EA versus EIS, if approved by the Commission to move forward the Part 51 rulemaking, please, I encourage you to provide comments, suggestions, so the staff can have the opportunity to evaluate the information and consider those as we proceed to write the Part 51 rulemaking.
All right, I have a question from Travis Chapman. Can you discuss the use of tropical reports, technical reports, and white papers, and how they can be used in pre-application process to get advanced feedback from the NRC staff on specific environmental site-specific topics?
So when you mentioned topical paper reports and white papers, we are looking more at the safety review than the environmental review. So I encourage pre-application activities so you can get a better understanding on how the topical reports, the white papers, how they align with the safety review and not so much the environmental review. So so that's a good segue for me to encourage anyone who's interested in coming in for a license for NRC to please engage with us during pre-application, because that's a good question, so you can understand the regulatory processes and the guidance and how each one of those fit on the risk review, so we could so you could better understand our processes.
Perfect. Is the 50-mile radius for the ESA likely to be reconsidered in the context of advanced reactors with small risk profiles?
Okay, at this point, it may be something that we can consider. That's a great question. I think during the comment period for the Ener guide, so the Part 53 rulemaking, as well as the proposal for the Part 51, please submit those comments for us to consider those so we can evaluate that construct currently and how we can or may not be able to make that change. Okay.
All right, this one potentially might need a follow-up from Chip Cameron. Mallecia, have you looked at the UCS criticism of SECY 210001 and request that it be withdrawn? One of the criticisms that 210001 references two Trump administration executive orders that have now been withdrawn by the Biden administration. What will the NRC do with these criticism? Thank you.
So I know we are staying abreast of all the new changes. I know we're looking at the CQ changes. We're looking at the we're also looking at the greenhouse gas emission that they also implementing. So I can honestly say I know the staff is staying on top of all of the different changes and legislation that has been put in at the previous administration, and the current administration is making changes to. So as we work on our current construct for the advanced reactor guides and other proposals, we are keeping abreast on making sure that as we deliver these products to the public, that they're up to date and have the current information in them.
All right, from Tara Nieder, is there a difference between the scope and timeline of environmental reviews for an ESP or CPA application?
I would have to say there's not really a difference between a CP review or a ESP review. What makes the review time is the package, the application. So if you engage with us early and we work together and understand the planning and what you need, when you submit an application, that determines your schedule. So if you submit a good application for CP or ESP, once we build our schedule, then we can work on understanding where the bottlenecks may be early and provide you a schedule that we can stay with. But if the application comes in and there's no engagement and it's not meeting the regulations and requirements that we need to provide a sound decision making for the commission, then yes, your schedule will be extended. So I have to go back and say that your timeline for an ESP or CP is going to be based on the type of application you submit to us. So if you can submit a complete application that meet our regulations, whatever schedule is provided to you during our schedule letter, NRC would hold there to that. But if there's holes or we are missing information, i.e. you haven't did the 6 months or year survey that's needed for endangered species or so forth, then that would delay the time that we can complete your review of your application.
All right, I have one from Enrique Velez. Can you develop a bit more on how reduce the requirement in an environmental impact R for a microreactor with respect to reactors of SMR size?
So staff developed ISG, I want to say 029, and in anticipation of receiving microreactors that provide staff a structured guidance on how to streamline the review for microreactors and how to provide analysis for the environmental reviews. So we have just one microreactor application that came in. So staff is using that guidance to streamline the current review time. So if anyone wants to look at NRIC 1555 and look at the ISG 029, that would give you an idea of what went into providing staff that construct to try to streamline a microreactor review.
All right, I think this next one kind of gets to why we scheduled this webinar in the first place. What is the most common oversight or error by an applicant that slows the NRC's review and may prompt requests for additional information?
So I can't think of any like particular areas. What I can encourage is, based on my experience with application, is really based on the interactions that we have early on during pre-application process and lack of pre-application interactions. So based on my experience, when we have that early engagement, early and often, and we get a application that comes in that is what I call on point, it has meets our regulations, it has the structure based on the environmental review and Part 51 review for environmental impact statement, then the review goes pretty smoothly. There might be bumps, there might be other questions, requests for additional information and so forth. But overall, we tend to meet the schedule. Where I find that we have issues is when we don't have that early engagement and we receive an application and then we have tendered application, meaning we may have to put the application on hold to work with the applicant, prospective applicant, to get additional information because we're missing data from that application that is needed for us to make our safety finding or environmental finding. That's when we seem to have a bottleneck or a longer review time frame.
And just a quick plug, next month we will be covering the pre-application process, and we can kind of dive deeper in May. The following question for Mallecia is, how does the NRC see the utilization of a PPE for a CPA?
Well, how do we see it? But I would have to say, because we are in the rulemaking process and we doing advanced reactors, and we are using the plan parameter envelope for that construct of the advanced reactors, once we issue it for public comment, you'll see that we made certain assumptions and values around the that technology neutral plan to come up with our PPE values and our site parameter envelope. So that is how you're using it. Is an assumption of values that are used, and if the prospective applicants fit within that construct, then they can use the advanced reactors guides to supplement, to provide a supplemental environmental impact statement that staff can then use to streamline the environmental review process. So I think that would be a helpful product for any of the advanced reactor vendors coming in for an application using the PPE.
All right, can you discuss how a generic advanced reactor EIS could be used in a tiered approach with a project-specific EAs? So as we develop the Part 51 rulemaking, if Commission grants us to do so, that's something that we will consider and something that the public can provide comments on. Like I said, currently for power reactors, our regulation says that for any power reactor, we have to complete an environmental impact statement. So I can't compare the two because currently the regulation states that we have to complete an environmental impact statement for any power reactor at this time. All right, I got a last one here. Many advanced microreactor developers are targeting systems which are advertised as being mobile. What complexities or differences might a mobile reactor bring regarding environmental permitting requirements that need to be considered?
So, and I know I'm gonna sound like a broken record, because currently we are developing like Part 51 guidance. We are looking at the category exclusion guide rulemaking. We also doing the advanced reactors guys. What I can say is that interested vendors should participate in these public outreach meetings and provide comments, provide suggestions, considerations that we can consider in our rulemaking as we are updating, so we can provide the necessary regulation and guidance that they need for such mobile reactors as these. Because like I said, these are new, and as we develop our regulations and our guidance, we are considering these new advanced reactor technologies. So during our public outreach meetings, please participate. Please provide suggestions, ideas, as the staff is considering these and how we will be able to implement in our regulations to make our reviews of advanced reactors seamless and go smoothly for any of these technologies that that you're interested in.
Well, Mallecia, thank you so much for taking the time to answer developers' questions and giving your presentation. I'm going to turn it over to Jason Andrews to kind of close this out.
Yeah, thank you.
First of all, I also want to echo my thanks for Mallecia, as well as a number of other NRC staff members that participated. In particular, I want to thank Ben Beasley and Greg Obertson in their efforts to help coordinate and prepare for this, as well as the NRIC staff. So a special thanks to Steve for his preparation and hosting, as well as some of the behind the scenes folks that you don't get to hear on these. But I certainly want to thank Donna Spangler, Cheyenne Odenthal, and Emily Gallegos for their work in preparing this and allowing this to run seamlessly. For those of us who struggle with technology issues, WebEx is always a fun one to work with, and it's amazing how much they do behind the scenes that we don't notice. So I do want to acknowledge them and thank them. I want to close out by saying what an exciting time to be in nuclear. You know, when we look at the opportunity we have for climate change issues, when we look at energy security and stability issues, when we look at the energy economic issues, you know, there are certainly micro reactor and advanced reactor developers that are looking to target all of those areas. And we're excited as part of INL and NRIC to help support moving those activities forward, you know, through design, through development, and into deployment. So it is certainly an exciting time for a nuclear engineer to be in nuclear, but also welcome to everybody who's not a nuclear engineer that's joining the field as well. We're happy to have you. And I also just want to, as a final plug, I do want to encourage folks to look out. There's a couple of other these NRIC Tech Talks that are coming up. In late May, we're going to have one on pre-application interactions. And then in early summer, we expect to have one on limited work authorizations. So I would encourage folks to frequently check back at nric.inl.gov for further announcements on the scheduling of those. And want to thank everybody for attending today. And with that, I'll close out the webinar. Thank you so much.